Hello, Assalamu alaikum everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And we are now going to kind of look into the matter of something that has probably been thought of by many of us in many varying capacities every now and then for years now, because this is not a new discussion or a new topic, socially, generally, legally, religiously, and that is the right to choose death, which, as you know, many countries have in some form or the other legalized it, as in accepted it as legal that a person has the right to choose his death. But obviously, it is supposed to be based on a very specific criteria, although these criteria they vary, but the specific laws and the eligibility criteria are, sort of strict in the sense that, for example, most of it accommodates the terminally ill, to be able to have dignity in dying, it's called assisted dying legally, you can say. So there's also, about medical aid in dying, the legality of medical aid in dying has been picked up across the world, and especially, I guess, you will see every now and then this matter crops up, and you would notice that in 2023, 2021, in these specific years, this subject was again picked up in legal arenas, it was picked up in the media, it was picked up in it was sort of portrayed. When media picks it up, the best way media can portray a subject that is under discussion, or a subject that may be a legal discussion in the coming future or at that very moment, then obviously they portray it through fiction, as in they will create dramas out of it. And it's much like how the government or the Ministry of Culture will use dramas to put forward the subject of, for example, family planning, or about AIDS, awareness on AIDS, or, and just like how as I talked about how the LGBTQ media, the queer media in Thailand is supposed to be soft power, in Thailand. And as I talked about how they actually are the ones who managed to pressurize the Thai government to legalize gay relationships, gay marriage, right? So, keeping that in mind, you might have noticed, as I said, that in 2021, in 2023, and now again in this 2025, some particular dramas have been made in Thailand, in Korea, in other countries, with regards to assisted dying, with regards to the legal aspect, of medical aid. Yes, I think it's no coincidence that we have at least two dramas at the moment in Korea alone that are bringing out this topic. You have the adaptation of a European drama, or a European serial, Mary Kills People, that is currently being aired or being broadcast, being aired as a Korean drama. And at the same time, you have an original Korean drama, which is actually a legal drama, and it is very much a legal drama, in the sense that it's not your romance with just a bit of law thrown into it, or investigation, or a lawyer and all. No, it's actually about law itself. Actually, currently two dramas were running side by side amongst the Korean dramas that were, one is still going on, and that is Beyond the Bar, and the other was Law in the City. And both of them were basically talking about the law itself. So these are actually very very refreshing dramas. The Korean TV industry tends to bring up these kind of real procedural dramas, not the Americanized version of procedural dramas, but real procedural dramas in a way where they show the just the life or the working space of doctors or of lawyers or of, yeah. So this is probably the third drama in which the working atmosphere of lawyers is being put in. If you remember, a few years ago, there was this very good drama. I think it was a diary of, or a day in a solicitor's life, or the diary of solicitors, or something of the sort. I forgot the name, but it was more or less that, and that was also a portrayal of how, lawyers, how they deal with their job on an everyday basis. So yeah, these kind of dramas are mainly, if you notice, they are focusing on the law itself. I mean, I'm talking now about these particular two dramas. And it's not, as I said, a coincidence that in Beyond the Bar, the question of assisted dying is raised. Because as I said, this is a question that is being raised at the moment. So it's no coincidence that you have two different dramas raising that question in two completely different capacities. One is in a very legal capacity in Beyond the Bar, where it's actually a legal discussion, and the other is the adaptation of an otherwise very old, we would, the way the world is going, you would call it old, TV series of, Mary Kills People. So needless to say, countries where the right to choose death is legalized in some form or the other is, excuse me, are the Netherlands, Belgium, Canada, Colombia, Luxembourg, New Zealand, Switzerland, obviously Switzerland. I think Switzerland was one of the first. Spain, Germany, and Austria. And all the states in Australia, by the way, and several US states, and the Washington, D.C., and several countries in South and Central America, right? These are the countries that have accepted legally the right to choose death. But again, remember, these laws are specific and the eligibility criteria also vary. But mostly, in some cases, it's just only and only for the terminally ill, and others, they have a wider range of conditions, right? And it's obviously mainly using euthanasia as the dignified form of death, right? Especially in the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, it is euthanasia for incurable diseases and unbearable suffering. In Switzerland, they allow assisted suicide for adults. In fact, they allowed it since 1942. Remember, I told you Switzerland was one of the first. So yeah, provided the motive is not selfish, according to Death with Dignity. And this you need to understand, because this is exactly why I'm going to tell you why this poses a controversy. In many countries still, where this debate cannot be accepted as something that can lead to legalizing death with dignity. Okay, then we have Spain, where the law was approved in 2021 for people with incurable or debilitating diseases. In Canada allows medical aid in dying for individuals with grievous and irremediable, as in incurable, medical conditions which are fatal. Germany and Austria, they have laws permitting some form of assisted dying. Okay, now coming to Australia, New Zealand. Australia, voluntary assisted dying, also known as VAD or VAD, is legal in all states, with Victoria being the first to implement it in 2017. And this is according to Dignity in Dying. And then we have New Zealand, right? So New Zealand approved assisted dying via a public referendum in 2020. The United States, about 11 states and the District of Columbia, they have laws allowing assisted dying for the terminally ill people. In Central and South America, 3 countries in these regions have passed laws allowing people with unbearable suffering to access assisted dying. Okay. Um, as I said, generally, widely, the term right to choose death encompasses both assisted suicide and euthanasia, okay, which are different processes. And there are safeguards, as I said, being put. For example, in countries like the UK and Australia, they implement strict safeguards, including judicial review to ensure fairness and protect vulnerable individuals. And this is the point here, because see, the although I personally, very personally, if you ask me, and if I put religion aside, if I put divine laws aside, if I put God himself aside, let's just, put everything aside and talk about me as personally, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I believe in the right to, because we don't have the right to choose generally in life, as in we didn't choose to come to this world, and then to be helpless that we can't even choose to exit from this world, I personally think is highly unfair. But now let's bring in religion, let's bring in divine law, let's bring in the Christian, Muslim, Judaist, and even other religions, by the way, because all religions one way or the other stem from the monotheistic religion of God, the same divine law. And that is, we are slaves of God. The whole point is that we are slaves, so we do not have the right to choose our death, our exit in the world. That is the ultimate, you understand, that is the ultimate pact that we have as slaves. In fact, that is the ultimate identification of us as slaves of God, right? We're not slaves of anybody else but God. And this is how you ultimately learn to submit to God's will, when you realize that, okay, only He has the right, because He brought you into this world. You had no say in it. He's going to take you out of this world only when He wants. And, to hell with whatever pain you're going through, and to hell with whatever it is that In fact, if anything, we are taught by the divine law that these illnesses and the suffering that we go through are basically washing us of all our sins before we exit the world, and that it is in fact something that is a good thing in the long term. Because remember, we have to remember that this world is not real, this world is not infinite, our lives are not infinite here. The world is going to end, we are going to end, and then we're going to go back to where we came from, which is the actual immortal life. So people who are looking for immortality in this world have actually forgotten that we are basically immortals in the world that we are coming from. And this is our temporary touch base. This is where we're going to be put through trials and tribulations to earn our place back up there. And then unfortunately, when we go back up there, we're not going to go to exactly where we came from. Many of us are going to end up in hell. A few of us are going to end up in heaven as it is, which is where we came from. So now, keeping all of that in mind, this is the religious, aspect. So we understand that, okay, we have no right to, define our own exit or to choose our own exit. Now, on a human level, this is also religion. Here too, religion is coming in, because religion is now telling you also why you're not allowed to assist somebody in dying. The safeguards that the UK and Australia have realized to implement, that is the reason, that is the debate. How do you know that that person really wants to die? In Islam, life is sacred, right? In all religions, life is sacred, again, for a reason. It's not just because we are slaves of God and that we have no choice and we have to live with that fact that we have no choice and we cannot choose to exit. It's not just that. It's, we have no right to choose who should live and who should die. And we should not be allowed to be given the power to help somebody die. Why? Life is sacred. You understand? Otherwise, we already have a very small provision that allows us legally to kill people, which we call justifiable homicide, right? That is self-defense. Mainly it all comes under self-defense, really. Justifiable homicide, okay? And when we go further into that, we understand that, okay, for example, if you're a doctor or a nurse and you think that you're being merciful towards a person who's going through unbearable pain and suffering, that there's no way out, and you think that the only way out is to help them escape, and that is obviously through death. But the thing is, even though people wish for death, as we know, 9 times out of 10, when they're actually on the brink of death, they don't want it, right? It's a psychological fact. 9 times out of 10, people on the brink of death actually no longer want it. So that is one, because our instincts of survival, they kick in. Again, it's psychological. It's not like, they're doing it deliberately. It's an instinct. It's the survival, instinct. It will be there. It will always be there. You have to have a very, very strong instinct to, and people think it's, yes, in one side it is cowardice maybe to commit suicide, yes, keeping everything else in mind, but at the same time, believe me, it takes a hell lot of strength to end your own life, because as I said, your survival instinct kicks in to be able to overcome that overwhelming feeling of survival, to actually beat that, to overcome that, and to kill yourself. It does take a lot of strength. So do not belittle that. But yes, it's cowardice on the other side, on the other sense, because you're saying, okay, that person has finally escaped, right? Because it is an escape. You're dying to escape it, right? So there is this. And then now we move on. Again, how do you know that that person, whoever is helping with assisted dying, especially if it's a spouse or a family member or anybody or a stranger or a friend, or again, even a doctor or a nurse, how do we know if they're really helping that person, or if they have other reasons, ulterior motives, for example? And then how are we going to decide, especially how are we going to decide that, yes, this person has truly, purely helped the other person in escaping misery and escaping suffering, with their own volition? How do we know? You see, it is a very dangerous thing to allow one person to have the power or the authority to decide who's to live or not, right? The only, again, widely accepted legalized form is acceptance or non-acceptance of CPR. So for example, if I say that, okay, if my heart stops and if I've stopped breathing and if I'm dead, I have the right to tell the person beforehand, as in I have the right to make it myself clear that I do not wish for CPR, right? That is a widely accepted legal, legal claim, you can say. Widely accepted all over the world. But at the same time, do you know that your family member or even the medical team, especially if your guardian or family member is there, they are allowed to override your do not resuscitate will. Strange, isn't it? On one side, you have the right to have a do not resuscitate, will, but somehow they also have the hospital may have the right to overturn it, given the circumstances, or your guardian or your family member. Again, why? Because you're keeping you're basically complying with the ultimate law, which is also the divine law, that life is sacred. You understand? That is why So, yes, if you keep in mind human nature, if you keep in mind the what we if you look around you and see what the world is coming to, then although much as I would love to advocate for assisted dying, I, keeping in mind everything, keeping in mind all the pros and the cons, the fact that the world is not such a good place, the fact that people are not very good people at the end of the day, in the sense that once you give power to somebody, misuse of power, abuse of power is 9 times out of 10 what you're going to get. As you know, I'm always complaining already about how parents think that they own their children just because God has given them this little bit of power or authority to help take care of his human beings that he's sending to this world through them. They're supposed to be his tools. They're supposed to get their wits about. They're supposed to know what they need to do, and yet they're too busy thinking that they own their children, and see how that abuse has become part of what has become today our toxic culture, right? So imagine if people would have the right to choose death, and then anybody can claim that, oh, I helped the person die because he chose death. And you cannot say that, okay, let's have some strict safeguards in place. Let's have judicial review and all will help. But again, for example, in countries where you can bribe the judges, or where you can bribe you can abuse the law, in most countries the law is still abused as well. The anybody who has money or power, or anything really, they can use the law, they can abuse the law. Again, where do you stand? This is a very, very gray area, is what I'm trying to say. No matter how many safeguards you try to put in, there will be this huge loophole that people are going to take advantage of. You understand? So we cannot allow people to have the right to choose to kill somebody. Because as I said, look at the words assisted dying. It's not like you are committing suicide yourself. It means somebody in the medical field or somebody close to you should be allowed to help you to die. It's two different things. Assisted dying is not committing suicide per se. It's taking the help of somebody to help you die. You understand? So it's not like a brutal, emotional, sudden, act of you just offing yourself, or you just overdosing, or you just cutting your wrists, or hanging yourself. It's not that. It's you in a very objective and cold-blooded manner to, just for the want of a better word, in a cold-blooded manner, you are literally laying out the whole plan of how you can be put to death. Now, it is also very cruel to the person. For example, if it's not somebody in the medical field, if it's not somebody whose profession it is, if it is somebody close to you, imagine what you're going to put that person through. Because at the end of the day, look, it doesn't matter that he knows that he's helped you escape. It doesn't matter that they know that, what they've done is not murder, but essentially it is still murder. You see? You've made murderers out of your loved ones, is what I'm saying. It doesn't matter if it comes under the generalization of justifiable homicide, for example, which obviously it cannot, because that is why you see it doesn't come under the clause of justifiable homicide. It has a completely new term, and a completely separate term, which is assisted dying. You understand? So, yes, it needs to be understood here. In fact, I was thinking of giving very, very clear cut, very, creating this whole, how do we say, logical stream of, reasons why it's wrong. But then I was thinking, when I actually started talking, I think it's just so much easier to just say it simply, why put through, all the different details when I can just summarize it, as I already have done, in a much better way, as to why I think that this isn't a gray area that should be kept in the black, as in it should not be from, as I said, the reason I'm talking about this is, as I said, the way the dramas are suddenly coming. This is never a coincidence. Take it from somebody who has been part of the media and who is a writer and, a producer by profession and qualification. When a theme is a running theme on TV and in the media in general, in the forms of films and dramas and series and serials and short films, if it's a running theme, or if you just see it sneaking up in weird ways all over your television, if it's a concurrent theme, it means it is something that is being discussed. It is something that is being put to review. It is something that the government, the legal circles, the political circles, it is something that has been put forward, and it is something that is being held in debate. It is something that they're thinking about. It is something that they're, debating about. Maybe the process has already started. Maybe they're thinking about starting the process. In any case, it's there. You understand? It means that subject at hand is out there in the concerned circles, and a decision is supposed to be made. As I said, take a very good example of how the soft power of Thailand managed to pressurize the government to accept and implement the law, except why? Because, as I said, this is not part of what the majority of Thailand wants. So this is not something that the government was inclined to. But do remember, this began at the same time when America, that same America that its own states, many of its own states have not yet accepted or legalized gay marriage, but the American government was pushing. They were pushing other countries to accept LGBTQ and legalize relationships and marriages, in different countries. They were pressurizing African countries, and African countries, their governments, very lovely, very, very, in a very lovely way, they retaliated back. They were pressurizing the Asian countries, which, as you can see, then resulted in the Thai government being pressurized internally by their LGBTQ media, and so finally they caved in. The government caved in, the judicial circles caved in, and the law was promoted, right? The law was accepted. Now, in Pakistan, they've got nothing better to do than to talk about their own, in Pakistan, the only thing that you will see that is concurrent, that is running, is about how to legalize the illegal government and how to once again bring in dictatorship and how to make the useless mofo a dictator to stay for 10 years and how to oust Imran Khan and how to kill everybody related to Imran Khan and how to kidnap and incarcerate and kill anybody and everybody in Pakistan that goes against the American planted. I mean, that is all they can think about, and that is all you will see circulating. They will bring terrorism in, they will create terrorism, they will create crime, they will create anything and everything just so that they can, one way or the other, maintain their governance. That is all you will ever hear in Pakistan. And so you know what they're up to. So my point is that whatever comes on your TV again and again, that is telling you what people who are supposed to represent you in the various fields that are important, such as the judicial, the political, the medical, so healthcare, you have the judiciary, and you have the media, and then you have the government itself, all four working their part to bring it together. You understand? This way they prepare the people for what's coming. So for example, they're preparing them for the idea of a sister dying in this case. We could say, I could be wrong, but I know I'm not. Or in Thailand's case, it was preparing the people for acceptance of LGBTQ and to accept gay marriage and to accept gay relationship, and so they finally got that. So that is basically, it's like how Hollywood or American and British cinema normalized PDA, and they literally were like, oh, it should be normal, you should do it in front of your kids, so all that started. And then with that started soft porn. I mean, that is what you would call it when you show sexual and nudity scenes, and now which has become so common. And then you sit and wonder why you're having teenage pregnancies. So, this is how, when you normalize something that the society had kept at bay for a particular reason, and you feel that there's no harm in bringing it out and normalizing it, then these are the repercussions, the consequences. You understand? It's like how, the debate of healthcare. That is another ongoing debate that you will note every now and then cropping up in the form of dramas and films and movies in Japan, in Korea, and in these kind of countries. Why more so than others? Why? I'll tell you why. Because they actually have the fortune to have foreseen the damage that can be done when healthcare, for example, becomes capitalized or commercialized, and it would one day become completely an elitist form, once again, that is out of the reach of the common man. And this is why they set about some really good, very good, I actually love their laws when it comes to healthcare, not allowing general hospitals, for example, even if they're private, not allowing them to completely capitalize on themselves. So they have put some safeguards in place, same as in Japan, which is even more strict. So they have put these safeguards in place that are not allowing businessmen to try to commercialize hospitals the way they have been commercialized in your otherwise in your face capitalist countries in the West, which, as you can see, are facing severe healthcare system breakdowns as a result of that. When you are only thinking of the elites, and when the elites are only thinking of themselves, and then they want to have centers that can cater only to them, at the same time hijacking centers that could cater and are catering to the general public, then a problem occurs. So, for example, in Pakistan, you've got this thing where nobody will touch the general hospital, nobody will touch government hospitals and all. There are private hospitals, and in private hospitals too, they have their own criteria where they have, like every other private hospital in every other country, including Korea and Japan, where you've got your VIP places, and anybody who has money and wants a room can get the private room. You've got your general ward, you've got everything is there, fine. But there's a balance, right? There's a balance even in public hospitals. But now imagine if you were to commercialize and 100% cosmetize healthcare so that it becomes one big elitist cosmetic beauty clinic rather than an actual hospital. You see what I'm saying? So, as I said, you can be allowed to make a completely separate hospital for the elites if you want to, but why would you want to hijack already existing hospitals and try to turn them into that? That is the same problem here, where we say that Pakistan, as I say, in fact, that Pakistan was hijacked from the very, I mean, if you had a problem with Pakistan, why did you hijack Pakistan? Pakistan was made by the people who wanted it to be made in a certain way, and it was lived in by the people who wanted to live there in a certain way. Who the frack are you to what? You know what? You go make your own country. You have a problem? Have the guts to go and make your own fucking country, is what I'm saying, right? So this is what I'm saying to businessmen too. You want your own freaking elitist hospitals and beauty clinics and commercial centers and whatever it is, that because you want to make money out of it, as if making money out of your pharmaceuticals wasn't enough. You know what? Go and have the guts to spend your own money, make your own freaking hospital and separate it for the elitists. Why do you have to hijack existing hospitals, general hospitals, the existing healthcare system? Why do you want to hijack that? Because it's easier, lesser money to be spent, isn't it? And then you get more subsidies and in the form of, budgets and subsidies and God knows what from the government, right? So you want to milk the taxes of the people while at the same time taking everything away from the people. That is the issue here, you understand? So that is what is going on here. And so when you see these recurring themes every now and then popping up again in the media, understand that this is what people are trying to do. They're trying to get these laws to be altered or passed, so that they can get these things done. So the same is with assisted dying, which is right now, it seems to be a theme that is popping up in these countries. our neighboring countries, we can say. Why? Because again, this is probably something that has been submitted, it has been put into the test, and people are now probably going to debate about it, or they already are debating about it. You understand? And it's not a short process, it's a long time taking process, obviously. But yes, again, as I said, keeping everything in mind, keeping in mind, even if you forget, as I said, even if you forget the divine law, forget religion, forget everything, you cannot give the power of somebody to decide another person's fate. That is the whole point here, you see. When we know and we have established this law just to make sure that these loopholes do not occur, why create a loophole in the name of a sister dying? Why create that loophole? We cannot afford to do that. As I said, keeping in mind the way our society is already at, where it's going towards, what is going on, how human life is already worthless at the moment. Human life has no value as we speak. Now imagine if your loved ones will be given the right to claim that they helped you die, and they can forge a letter in your name, just like how people forge suicides every day. When murders occur left, right, and center, where powerful people are in play, and then you're like, oh, this person committed suicide, and you find out, no, actually, you know what? How do you know? His suicide letter could have been forged. There's already so much crime that is occurring without loopholes and with loopholes. Now imagine if you create another loophole for another crime to be committed. It is a crime at the end of the day. As I said, even if you're telling somebody to help you, and if that person is not, for example, a professional, right, as in not in the medical field, not part of the judicial review that has been selected, that okay, yeah, this person or this doctor or this nurse or this hospital can help you with assisted dying or whatever. But imagine, they're also human beings. At one point it will take a toll. And if you're not going towards there, and if you're going towards using or taking the help of your loved ones, then that is an even bigger toll that you're putting them through. Imagine the toll it will take. Imagine how psychologically they can break down, because as I said, taking a life for a normal person is not easy. It will hit back. It will hit back very badly. Taking the life of somebody is essentially committing murder, even if you're helping that person. You understand? And as I said, this power of life should never be given to anybody anyway. Without this power given, people are committing murders every day in so many various forms. Okay, people are killing their children and committing suicide. People are killing their children and their spouses. People are already committing suicide on their own. I think it is better to take the responsibility yourself. You want to die, you go commit suicide, okay? But don't put that burden on somebody else. That's one way. The other way I'll say it is, don't give the power of your life and death to somebody else. Do not allow anyone to have the power, no matter who. So yes, it is better that this law is not passed, despite the fact that I am all for it personally. But again, as I said, we're not talking about me, we're not talking about you. The law is not made for me or you. The law is made for the whole population. And to accommodate a few sensible people, you are literally giving the knife to a whole lot of stupid people and a whole lot of criminals. You understand? So no. At the end of the day, if God has stated that life is sacred and life is above all and nobody should have the power over another one, then it is for this reason. Because imagine the mayhem that will be caused. As I said, people are not that civilized. We're still a very small minority of us that are civilized enough to differentiate. But in general, people are not civilized. This will be yet another tool that you're giving to somebody to now legally commit murder. You understand? We need to keep in mind, again, the whole population, not that small minority. I'm sorry. Why? Because laws are not made for specific groups or for specific people. Laws are made to apply to everybody. You understand? So, yes, one can always argue about extenuating circumstances, and one can argue about that. That is a whole different caboodle when you cross that bridge, if ever assisted dying comes into play. But legally, it should not be a law. And in Muslim countries, as you know, and in Christian, although there are very few Christian countries, really, I think there are next to no Christian countries, as in legally, judicially or constitutionally speaking. But we have Muslim countries who are constitutionally Muslim countries. And so suffice it to say that no Muslim country will ever allow assisted dying, because the law is clear. You see, in Islam, we have a legal framework. In fact, the whole world, basically the whole modern world, has based its legal framework on Islam's legal framework, which is the Sharia, like it or not, accept it or not. But it's a fact, okay? It's an on the record fact. So there's no argument there. So, yeah. So in the Islamic legal framework, it is very clear that under no circumstances are you allowed to take another one's life or to help another one kill himself. Under no circumstances, no matter what, okay? Except, as I said, when it is a case of self-defense or justifiable homicide, or if it is a capital punishment which is given to the law, to the judiciary, that is. And that's it. But no man should have the power to take another's life. And it is there for a reason. Again, this is there for a reason. We need to respect that. We need to respect that if we want to have any semblance of dignity, actual dignity in our lives. Because just imagine the consequences, the repercussions of having this one tool in everybody's hands, where you can easily be killed. And that person would say, oh, that person can manufacture an illness, or or maybe you really are ill, but you don't want to die, but that person's sick and tired of it. It's like, oh, let's just go ahead with assisted dying, You do not know. And you should never give the power of your life to another person. As I said, it's already unfair enough that we do not have the power to exit, right? That is what we think is unfair, right? That God has the power. He has not allowed us to make the decision to exit from this world. So why do you want to give another person the power to help you exit from this world? When we're already screaming blue murder about the fact that God has the power and He hasn't allowed us to have that power over ourselves. You understand? Committing suicide is something else. Assisted dying is something else. You need to differentiate the two, and they are differentiated already for a reason. Well, this is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.